Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another podcast. I'm here tonight with Mr. Mark Murfield
Evening Legends.
and Dr. Luke Blacksall.
Hey, punk.
All right. Topics for discussion today. The London Legends GT 2026 is back. Um, Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition is back, or it never left. And what's that you got there, Luke?
Oh, God, this. I can't remember. Some kind of ancient. Ugh. No, it's not. I like it, really. It's the sixth ed book. Yeah, that's where it's at, punks. That's what we're talking about.
Mark's
Why
got the full
everyone's.
display behind him.
Only hands. Yeah.
Yeah, Monstrous Arcanum, Tamakan. Don't give them your address, Mark, because there's probably, I don't know, maybe about 1,000 quid's worth of stuff behind you, right?
Exactly.
Thought I'd put it all on display. It's pretty much everything eighth.
What a king.
Getting the theme.
Yeah, so guys, it's still more eighth edition. And one of the things we're going to be talking about in this video is, the strange survival, as I think I might call it, of this edition of the game in a new world. Or
That's
an
right.
old
I was thinking about it the other day because this is the fourth time we'll be running London Legends, which, for those of you who don't know, is a 2-day, 5-game, 8th Ed GT in London, 13th and 14th of June. Few tickets still available. I'll put the link in the description. Fourth time we're running it, and actually the third time since Old World's been released, right? And so obviously, a lot of players have gravitated towards Old World, as you can imagine. Still a lot of buzz around the Old World events, still lots of new models and new rules being released. But 8th Ed events still going strong, not just ours, of course, others around the country, and quite a loyal player base, I would say.
Yes, and I think, we've done London Legends 4 times. The second time was fairly shortly after the release of Old World. But definitely the time before and this time, we are really now in the confines of playing what is legitimately kind of History Hammer. Look, it was always History Hammer before because this game was blown up in
Mm.
2015, but this is now genuinely taken its place in the sort of historical pantheon. And there was always a question mark for eighth ed players of, well, what happens now that Old World is there? Are the players playing eight because it's the last known good configuration of Warhammer Fantasy, or is it because it's eighth edition? And we never really knew that. Sixth ed players, always knew that they were playing sixth ed because it was sixth ed, but eighth ed players didn't know they were playing it because it was, well, probably they knew, but they didn't necessarily know the community was. And the truth is, some players have left, a few have actually come back,
Mm.
and there is still a scene of competitive eighth events in the UK. There's a couple of Cardiff events each year. There's London Legends. And then, of course, there's a new entry into the scene, which is the Thundercocks GT in Birmingham. So there are at least four, not taking into account some others as well. The Sheffield one, too. So it's still going.
And how, because you guys went to Thundercocks, right? I mean, what would you say was the feeling at the event? I mean, when I obviously I've been to Old World events this year, and I know how that feels. And I suppose Luke, you've been to both, and how would you compare it? I mean, is there that same buzz?
I think it's slightly different. So I think with the London Legends, it feels almost to me, maybe I'm a bit biased, almost very nostalgic in the sense that this is really the place where this version of the game that everyone loves is being played. With the Birmingham event, the Thundercocks one, I think because it was supported by quite a lot of people who were very competitive eighth ed players, it almost felt almost wonderfully kind of almost business as usual in a funny kind of way. Nobody there was existentially talking about, oh, Old World versus eighth ed. I mean, I did a bit, but
Yeah.
it wasn't really a popular topic of discussion. Everyone was talking about eighth ed just as they were before. And so, this might be a preservation steam railway now, but for the people who are on it, it's still the 210 to Paddington.
It
And
is
so it still
interesting
feels alive.
because you both regularly go to Old World, or I say regularly, but fairly regularly go to Old World tournaments. So is there a different vibe between that and an eighth?
What do you think, Simon?
Well, I think yes. In that, well, look, the first thing to say, right, is that most people who play Old World are still people who used to play fantasy battles, right? It's not like all the youth from 40k and AOS and now loads of them are playing Old World. It's mainly people who played 6th Ed and 8th Ed before, right? And so it doesn't feel like it's a kind of massively different type of crowd, like in terms of demographic. It feels like a very similar demographic. And a lot of people are playing both games. So a lot of people, who were playing 8th are still playing it a bit, like myself, playing Old World perhaps a bit more. Um, obviously there's just a lot of players who, for that time, after 8th Ed was discontinued, were playing something else or not playing anything, or different game set altogether, and then have come back into it. And so there is definitely that buzz of like, a game that people have only been playing for a couple of years, and new models are being released and new rules are being released, and it's changing constantly. And so there is that kind of buzz to it, yeah. And obviously, I haven't been to an 8th Ed event in a while, apart from ours. And the idea in my mind is that it wouldn't quite have the same buzz as Old World has at the moment. But that said, people have their own different. People would react in different ways to um, Old World now existing, right? So a question that I've got a few times from different people, right, is asking me about London Legends and saying things like, well, now the Old World's there, is London Legends kind of less competitive now, has it kind of mellowed out now, or and my answer is kind of not really. I mean, people, I guess, feel a bit freer to, do whatever they want when they're going to 8th Ed events now, because it's kind of like the stakes are lower in a way. But for some people, that means more competitive than before.
I think one thing there is that I think, well, we can talk about the vibe of Old World events versus 8th Ed events, but I think that what is true of everything is that there is definitely what you would call a kind of a scene that attaches to any given event. Even London Legends, where we have a lot of people coming in internationally, where there's more flux.
Yeah.
I mean, at the one Old World event that myself and Simon both went to in Colchester, this was many of the people there went to a very popular 8th Ed event called Triple Crown. And so there was definitely much more of it was in that kind of weird luminal space between 8th and Old World. And some of the people who were playing there probably mainly were 8th players, but weren't really playing anything else, but still decided to go along to this maybe more local for them event in Essex. But then at the same time, with some other Old World events, like certainly something like the London GT or anything organised by the sort of the main what is it called, the UKTC, that will be very meta focused and very much like a kind of a sort of a new game. And then there will be some places like the Bad Moon events, for example, in London, where again there's perhaps slightly more of a kind of a current scene kind of feel. And the point here is that London Legends, just as the Birmingham 8th Ed event, have got their own kind of little scenes, and so they have their own different kind of vibe. And the London Legends vibe is, I think, as competitive as it was before, because each year we've had a bunch of rather good players at it, or at least 8 or 10 pretty competitive ones, and a lot more casual ones as well, I should say.
Yeah. It's the whole spectrum, isn't it? What I've quite liked about London Legends as well, and I can't comment on any of the other 8th, is each year we've had some different lists, like Adam's list, which won it. He bought quite a different list that I don't think I've seen before, and it kind of totally threw, I suppose, what people were expecting, perhaps. And it was fantastic themed list. Deserved to win just for being different, but I think even
Adam
when we looked at it,
but for those who
Slanesh, wasn't it?
So he had a Chaos Lord and a Steed of Slanesh. With, I believe it's called the Pendant of Slanesh. It's an item that allows him to take a leadership test on 1d6. And I'm a very experienced Chaos player, and I had always just passed the item and thought, why would you want to have a Chaos Lord of Slanesh as the first thing? And okay, this pendant thing, I'm not expecting my Chaos Lord to break anyway. Do I really need that? But he goes in a Steed of Slanesh, so he vanguards. Then he's taking a break test, to say, on 1d6. And so literally, even if he needs insane courage, he's still passing that test one time in 3 anyway. And so with the BSB, it's suddenly getting up to 50-50. And, he's still a Chaos Lord, and so he's going to kill a few things anyway. So he's probably, he might be down to leadership 5, something like that. And in that case, he's probably going to hold. So he's much stickier than you think.
Yeah. No, it was
Yeah.
good. And
So
then
people being able to innovate, even now, even years later, there are still things you can do in 8th ed that might allow you to do a party trick and win a tournament. Not saying that's all that Adam did. He's a very good player, and there were other reasons why he did as well as he did. But he had something people hadn't seen in a game that came out in 2010. With all of this, years and years later, there are still moves you can pull, because that's how detailed it is. That's the range of expression that there is in 8th edition to do all of this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why we still love it. Because we complain sometimes that old world can feel a little bit predictable, even within the rules of now. But 8th ed has got so many different permutations.
That's right, yeah. And I think we mentioned this on our last video, the sort of debrief we did from last year's event, but the army lists that you see at an 8th ed event are sort of more varied, I would say. A lot of the games I play of Old World, and nobody can accuse me of not liking Old World, I've been playing it quite solidly for the last couple of years, but a lot of the games seem a bit samey. Like, I've played this matchup before, it's a very similar list. And I think just that 50% characters, style of 2,000-point list where you got 1,000 points characters, it kind of does produce the same list a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of the sort of Lord choices are quite similar. You've got a lot of Lords who have got weapon skill 7, about 4 or 5 attacks, and they can all ride a dragon or something like that. And they all have, a 5-up ward save. And, they might have, I guess they don't so much have the Ogre Blade anymore, but there's not a lot of distinction between them. And then with, say, the spells, okay, you've got a lot of spells that do 2d6 strength 4 hits. There are a couple of very exceptional ones. Well, really one, Vile Tide. And as I say, there are not a lot of the components in different armies feel quite similar as a result. Whereas, as I say, in 8th ed, even if you just look at the magic alone, notwithstanding anything else, the amount of variation you have even within the magic system is probably already 5 times what you get in Old World. And so if you like variety, and look, variety isn't necessarily the only thing that's good in a game, but there's a lot of unpredictability in it. And I honestly can never say I played the same game of 8th edition twice. And I remember almost every single 8th ed game I've ever played, even going back to, 2017 when I started playing it.
And Alex Warboss Wheatley has got the rankings up now.
Yeah, thundercockrankings.com.
Yeah, so there you go. So in Old World, you've got rankings which have been out for about a year and a half. And so even you're seeing this innovation here, even in 8th ed. I think that there were rankings going back. Yeah. Is that right, Mark? Going back in time with 8th edition?
I don't think there was one unified platform kind of like there is now for Old World. I mean, you had a couple of them. You had, I think it was EWWL was one. Someone tried to start off. I think I might be getting that acronym wrong. But yeah, there were a few knocking around. Obviously, you had all your ETCs and stuff like that for the team, other than WTC.
I think the thing that perhaps I didn't quite realize this myself, actually, because I started playing 8th post the death of it. But there was a really, really big competitive 8th ed scene. There were events that were much larger than Old World events with much greater frequency. I'm going to say, let nobody tell you that this Old World is a bigger competitive scene than 8th ed was, because that's rubbish. Absolutely, it is. It is not. Casuals, no. I wouldn't want to speculate. But
I think we've discussed this before, Luke, with the 8th edition scene, there were less big. Well, actually, this may not be true, but you had a couple of massive ones which had like hundreds of people there.
Yeah. I
think like the South Coast GT was one of the really, really big ones. So you had a couple of which were just massive compared to everything else. Whereas I think Old World seems more fragmented, like everybody seems to be running tournaments, which is not a bad thing at all.
My understanding is while there were some big events like the South Coast GT, there were also some that were getting into the 60, 70 kind of range that were also a lot more frequent too. I mean, the number of players and the number of tournaments. I mean, so there are a lot of small old world tournaments, but you see, we probably know about them a bit more because they're centralized in old world rankings. I mean, who knows what small 8-bed events were going on, but there was probably no way of pulling it together. The competitive scene in old world is much, much smaller, and I think that's, which is nothing. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes players, I think, forget that point, and
it's a shame
rather
that Warhammer.org went down at some point, because I think a lot of it was all on there.
Yeah, there's a lot of it that had some, if people have got saved web pages and things, there's a lot of this history just disappeared, and suddenly it was like a fire in the Great Library all disappearing, and this age of antiquity kind of went up in smoke. The only difference is that there are, between my very strange metaphor about the Great Library burning down, not sure where I got with that, is that there are plenty of people who remember what was in the Great Library, who weren't destroyed by its fire themselves and can reminisce about what it was like. But all we can do is kind of transmit the message. And it's not designed to be a message of nostalgia or sentimentality. Well, partly perhaps it is, or to say, well, there's a lost golden age. It's just to give a little bit of historical reflection that when we talk about AIDS, we're not just, like old men playing with their sort of steam preservation railway. We are dialing in to a time when Warhammer Fantasy as a competitive enterprise was almost, I think, beyond argument at its absolute zenith in terms of the number of people competing in it, and in terms of how sharpened the understanding of the rules were, and how competitive people were being as well compared to what they are in old world. Because in old world, you can't be that competitive because the rules are aren't stress tested enough, I think, to really play in that way.
Yeah, and it's almost like a bit unfortunate that whenever we sort of try and contextualize 8th edition and talk about it, it kind of sounds like we're trying to do old world down in some way, which we're definitely not. I'm a big fan of old world. I go to events regularly. I produce videos, as many of you will know who are watching this. But a bit like you said in your latest video, Luke, where you talked about the spectre of 8th edition sort of looming over us. And I think that's sort of evident in the way that old world's moving, because obviously this 1.5 change, things like only the front rank can fight and the second rank can't fight is now being changed, and the second rank can fight now. And we haven't quite gone back to base, but the line hammer's been nerfed, and we've got infantry given a buff, which is kind of moving in the direction of 8th edition.
And then there's renegades as well, and some of the changes that are being put into renegades arguably, I think, are also calling back to 8th edition. So it's kind of there as it is for Mark down there. It's behind everyone, under the bed, somewhere in the corner of your eye. It's been impossible really to remove it. And there is a reason for that, because it was good.
Although Val did, so he's actually done a very recent video on tabletop tactics, which is primarily a big 40K channel, but they're very good. They do lots of different content. But he was actually saying a lot of what he's hearkening back to is actually 7th on his rules.
Interesting. Well, maybe it's one of these things where we see the ghosts of what we wish to see. But I see a lot of 8. Yeah. Maybe that's because I don't know what to look for, because I never played 7.
I mean, he may have been primarily alluding to the Skaven, because that was the 7th book. So, but
indeed.
So, but yeah, no. Excellent.
But it feels as though, I guess, when people go back into Warhammer of the past, that unless they're very deliberately going for 6th ed with its very particular feel, that if they're going for what Warhammer Fantasy was in its most recent iteration, of course that was 8th. And so unless you deliberately want to jump over that when you go back in time and go back deliberately to 6th edition, and I know some people do try and do that because they like that era particularly, like you get people who like the, say, Ravening Hordes kind of era, they really goes for it, or they like 7th ed core rules with 6th ed armies or whatever, certainly flavors of time travel. If you go on any kind of time travel and don't specify the time machine's destination, at some point in Warhammer Fantasy's recent past, you probably are going to be calling more back from 8th ed than anything else, because it was the last known good configuration, which is perhaps why when we know there's a ghost immediately, turns
I
into
mean,
8th edition.
what I did like about Old World and do like about Old World is they tried something different. A bit like Eighth was quite a radical departure in some respects from Seventh and before. Fourth, fifth, fairly similar. Sixth, seventh, fairly similar, and even fourth to sixth wasn't hugely different in core rules. I mean, eighth still grew on those core rules, but and introduced some fairly drastic changes for a lot of people. Old World did something similar with what they've done, although they were clawing back to things like, was it Warhammer Ancients, whatever it was. And, they've recognized that actually some of it didn't work, well, which is why you got 1.5. So, but they
Well,
tried
to me,
something
it feels
different.
like. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, to me, it feels like though, while I agree that they did in many respects look at previous editions and try to pick the best bits that they liked and stuff, but also there are some changes that feel like they're more just corporate changes that are being led by other factors other than just the design of a good game, right? I mean,
Yeah.
why, for example, do they want to produce a game where you can take two dragons in a 2,000 point army?
Oh,
I mean, who thought that that would be a
fun.
good thing? Like, why do we need two dragons in a 2,000 point army? Why can't it just be in a 2,000 point army, you can only take one dragon, and then if you play a 3,000 point game, then you can take two dragons. Do you know what I mean?
Just with that point in and of itself, and we've talked about this a lot, two dragons in 2,000 points. What other edition has that even been physically possible to
Yeah.
do? I don't think it possible. So, okay, no way. Sixth ed, no, because you're one lord, one dragon. In eighth ed, can you pick two dragons in 2,000 points?
Maybe
Probably
high elf.
not, because you won't have enough to be able to buy the lord choice that can ride it. If high elves,
Yeah.
you couldn't have two princes in 2,000
No, you could
points.
probably fit a dragon mage and maybe a lord on or something.
Yeah, but not a full
Yeah.
out
But not
dragon
a
because you've got
No.
25% lords.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even in fourth ed,
I
no,
don't
because the dragon, even the basic dragon, costs
was
450
really
points before his
pricey.
rider. So you're
You
going to
could have
hit
got a
one.
couple of wyverns or something.
Yeah, the wyvern is
Yeah.
180 points.
That's different. Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is that if we're going back to fourth ed, the wyvern is 4 wounds,
Yeah.
3 attacks. It's I mean,
Yeah,
in
it
old
was-
world, the wyvern becomes much more dragon-like because the stacking saves, but it wasn't before. But that's the point. Double dragon. And when we say double dragon, we mean double
Proper
really
dragon.
good kind of dragon with
Yeah.
the combat lord on it, maybe. That's never been possible in any edition of fantasy previously,
Apart
except in
from
old world.
end
Yeah.
times when they upped the limit to 50% lords and heroes.
Yeah,
That's
apart from in
probably
a
about it.
very obscure version of 8th ed right at the end. And in any case, that wasn't an optimal way of playing because Monster and Rider were not strong in 8th edition because of the way in which cannons worked and various other things. So exactly, so it's not been possible to do it, as you say, until now in old world. So that's one
So
of
it
the
seems
changes they've
like,
made.
to me, it seems like the decision is being driven by a fact that they say they want the armies to be a certain way. They want it to be small armies with bigger models.
Yeah.
And I can see why, from a commercial standpoint, they want to sell the big models. They want to make it easier for people to build an army and start playing it rather than having to paint loads of infantry or whatever. But it's to me, it seems like the decision is more based on, the selling the models rather than the gameplay.
It might be, and as I say, we've stumbled on, I think, a really rather interesting, and even this is a London Legends video here. It might be that the economies of, as you say, if you're going to reboot, say, a Dragon kit or something from the past, that the amount of investment required to restock that versus your profit margin on the kit might be greater than encouraging people to buy a whole bunch of infantry that you've got to invest into. I don't know how the money works with this, but it might be that the smaller number of bigger models is more profitable. Maybe. I don't know.
Not just that it's more profitable, but that it's more fun to paint the big models than it is to paint lots of infantry. And so,
yeah, I think most people probably think that.
I would dispute that because that's me, isn't it? I love backpainting hundreds of models and hate individual models because I'm not that brilliant at painting. So it's easy.
And also because some things look better at scale. The average painter who produces a regiment of 100 goblins is genuinely impressive. Whereas if it's just a dragon, then it's not. So
But I was
Depends
thinking
on
about
how
that the
good
other
you
day,
are.
right? Because I've just recently painted up my Chaos Dwarfs for Old World, and the army is sort of finished now. And I was
And it
thinking,
looks
well,
lovely
why
in
don't
your
I try
video.
running Chaos Dwarfs in 8th Ed? And I realized, well, I need to paint like another 30, 40 infantry or something. Because how
Yeah.
am I going to fill out my core in 8th Ed? Like, just I need more models.
You need the
Right.
Yeah.
hobgoblins.
Yeah, but
I'll,
that
I'll,
and
I'll probably
that's
just get some unit fillers or something.
yeah, and that's taking that's going to take a yeah. You can get unit
Yeah,
fillers.
yeah,
But I think where we were kind of in a sense going is that before we got into that sidetrack was
yeah,
that there have been stylistic changes in Warhammer Fantasy over time. It hasn't quite been edition to edition because some editions have been more similar to each other,
Yeah.
but there have been changes. And Old World, had its changes, and fair enough, they decided to make certain stylistic decisions. I think most of the stylistic decisions they made were bad in the sense that I don't think that they made the game better, but I still would defend their right to roll the dice again, so to speak, and to change something and to place their own mark and imprint on a new edition of the game. I don't think in posterity Warhammer the Old World will go down as rules-wise a very good edition. I do not think it will be historicized in that way, but absolutely they can try. Hopefully, the second edition of Old World will be the equivalent of 7th edition, the equivalent of 5th edition. You will be the slightly tidied up version of a bunch of concepts, I imagine.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. If they can do that and build on what's worked, get rid of what hasn't, and improve on that, it'll be the second edition should be really promising.
It should be really good. As I say, they only need to check to remove, in my opinion, about 4 or 5 things, and the game will just be infinitely better.
We won't go into those now.
We won't go into those. Yeah, that's a whole bunch of things. Because we're here to, but talk about 8th edition, I guess, in a broader context. And I say the thing is with it is that as part of that ongoing discussion about the state of Old World, being in touch with previous editions of fantasy, in my opinion, especially 8th edition, is important because this directly informs the conversation of where we are going. They decided not to take a lot of the stylistic changes that there were in 8th edition in Old World. And so and obviously Old World has got its flaws. So that rather does sort of suggest, step into the spotlight, 8th edition, show us what you could bring to the party, please, or Old World edition 2. It's still relevant in the conversation here. As I say, it was a long time ago, but that's why it's still there and it won't go away because some of the things it did were very, very good, especially for competitive play, which of course is now more important to the Old World community than GW thought that it was, which is why, 8th edition has got its foot in the door and saying, hey, remember me.
Yeah. I have to admit, like Thundercox is the first GT I've been to since apart from ours, since about 2000 or something like that, like back in the start of 6th or something, which shows probably to the viewer here how competitive I am on a GT front. But I tend to collect, as you can probably tell from the background. But I mean, the one thing I did massively notice about it was the charging. That was the key thing, like the freewheel in the charge. That for me, if they could do something like that, so it becomes a bit more viable.
And infantry can charge in 8th Ed.
I was playing some practice games of 8th Ed against my main nav, and I played my Bretonians, and he had his orcs, and I was going in, measuring 10 inches away from the orcs. And he gave me, and to be fair to him, he gave me plenty of warning. He said, that I need to roll a 6 on the dice, and then I'm into your knights with like my big savage orc block. And I thought, okay, shit, and then just moved back.
But it just plays faster, doesn't it? Because not only could the charge distances a lot longer, but you can charge out of units and things like that. The
freewheeling is
it's the wheel. That's the big difference, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think.
Those two things compounded. The battlefield starts to look smaller, and you get to decisive combats in turn 2 sometimes instead of turn 3 or 4.
Because when you look at the stats of, like, say, take dwarf artillery, right? You look at the organ gun and the cannon, and you think, wow, this firepower is so amazing. How is anything going to be still alive by the time it gets to you? Well, because it will be into you by turn two. That's why.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
you can't just, especially put your cannon on the edge of the board and
Yeah.
say, well, he isn't going to get there till the end of the game.
Yeah.
Not really, because if he sends some fast things after you, he could be there in turn two. So you've got to have to do something about that. You can't just, you could put you could put it in the corner and you might survive for one more turn, but it's
Yeah.
not blasting away from a remote corner of the battlefield where he's just not going to go. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen in 8th Ed. The table is just too small.
Okay, so London Legends then. We're back at Dark Sphere, 13th, 14th of June. West London, where it all began.
Yes, where Games Workshop was founded just up the road on the Uxbridge Road. I unwittingly lived 3 doors down from that as a student, and I had no idea. It's now Winkworth Estate Agents, or it was when I was there anyway, where Jackson and Livingston started Games Workshop out of their flat. The first Games Workshop store was opened just down the road in Hammersmith. So, in a manner of speaking, even though Games Workshop wasn't initially Warhammer Fantasy, it was mainly the UK licensed distributor of D&D. That's how they made their real kind of killing story in itself. That, but yeah, back in here in West London, in the seminal and authentic kind of Dark Sphere with all of its
Yeah.
nerdy glory.
And if anyone hasn't been to Dark Sphere in Shepherd's Bush before, authentic London is perhaps how I would describe it.
Absolutely, the full spectrum.
Always something happening.
Yes, exactly. The full spectrum of everything is there.
Yeah.
Dark Sphere is a very large venue in the basement of a kind of knacked out shopping mall.
Yeah.
And it's got its own kind of vibe. It's run by people who they're pretty cool. They're not in there for capitalist surplus. They're there because they love, I don't know, running a gaming store. So as I say, it's not some cynical place. It's a place where stuff happens.
It's an experience, yeah. And we've got, as you said, you mentioned earlier, people flying in internationally. We've got guys from Germany. We've got the guys from Finland. We've got the Shetland boys coming down.
Oh, it's going to be good to see Brian and Dale. I think I'm
really pumped. I'm so excited.
Everyone else is dreading the drinking with them, I'm sure, because they'll all be destroyed the next day.
We've got the Essex boys coming down as usual.
Yeah. I mean, on 1 year of London Legends, I believe it was the year before last, we had something like I think a quarter, maybe even getting up to a third of people who had taken an aeroplane to get to London Legends. And say, like London, truly is international and cosmopolitan.
Yeah. That was the year when we had the Swedes, wasn't it? Yeah.
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 So it's becoming, it's definitely got that kind of that reputation. And I suppose the thing is that people will travel internationally to play 8th edition. Would they travel internationally to play Old World? Unless it's, I doubt it, unless it's, I guess,
like the WTC or
something like the WTC. And that's partly because you can hopefully get Old World events in your country. I mean, even though we've spoken about the survival of 8th Ed in the UK, I'm not sure how true that is in other countries. I mean, it might well be the case that I wouldn't want to say about the German scene or the Swedish scene, but there might not be events there. And so for people who love it, it might well mean flying to London. But they're prepared to do it. And, it's great that they
are. Usual prizes then. So first, second, third, best painted, which is always hotly contested.
And London Legends, it has been incredibly hotly contested over the years. In that, what I mean by that is some of the people who have not won Best Painted were ludicrously good. And I mean, because I've been at many events and indeed won Best Painted at some events where, it was not as it is at London Legends, but there have multiple times been incredible. I mean, like, for example, we had like Lewis Flanders Orklist last time did not win the Best Painted. And that was, while he hadn't, I believe, finished all of it, the standard of what he was putting out was incredible.
Better every year as well.
Oh, he had him. I mean, his Nurgle Demon Army was excellent, but at the same time, it was it was based upon the mastery of a particular technique. Whereas the Orc army, he has mastered many different techniques to be able to paint the different kind of units. He can't just go with the same thing for everything, in that he has become both someone who he had mastered a technique before, but now he is objectively an extremely good painter. And he was talking about taking some tips, I believe it was from
Michael.
Callum. No, Michael
No,
Duff. Michael Duff.
Who is he? I believe might be
Yeah, Mike's coming.
with his Slanesh again this year, and that Slanesh army is a thing of beauty.
Yeah, well, I don't know. He's got a Tomb King's army as well, hasn't he?
Oh, has he? Ooh.
I think so. Yeah.
The thing is that I know that Lewis had taken some painting tips from Mike, and he was telling me what some of those were, and they were really incisive painting tips as well. I mean, you can, transmit knowledge on a high level, and it's nice that people, are giving giving that kind of advice. And I mean, it's I mean, some of the, to be honest, I'm not even thinking even about old world events. I've not seen any armies of the same kind of standard that we had at London Legends at the top of old world events. So maybe I'm running my mouth a little bit here, but
I'd have to think, yeah. I mean, it's just the standard's been so high, isn't it, every year? I mean, we've introduced this other award called the Best Themed Army, which is painting, but also collecting, modeling, and designing a list that has a cool theme to it, right? So partly painting, but not just painting. I mean, and that as well. I mean, there's been so many armies where it's like, any of these like 5 armies could win best themed,
I mean, we had to put it in because there were just so many good armies.
Yeah.
So last year we had Ian Andrews' Skaven that won that. And I mean, he'd been collecting that army 40 years, and it's got like a story in itself kind of behind it, because we wanted to give for an award something that wasn't just about the objective skill with a paintbrush, which is one thing, but there is also something deeper than that, which is about modeling, collecting, hobbying, and it may even be that it's part of the story, part of the theme behind it. So we had an ogre army with a pirate theme that won one year before. Ian's army was, I suppose, more of an eclectic story about him, Andy Chambers, and the hobby, more so than a specific theme that was readily accessible to people looking at it. Oh, and a color scheme as well, but still a theme.
Was it the first London Legends that Callum won it with his Skaven? I can't remember if that was the first one, because that itself was also.
But we didn't have best themed on the first one, though, did we?
Was that just
no?
best
I
painted?
don't believe we did have best theme. Certainly Lewis with his Wall of Nurgle won a theme, but I think that was the year 8. Yeah, we only had best painted on its own to start with, and as I say, that was very hotly contested between Callum and Michael Duff and Adam Knight. But Callum Skaven, magnificent, and similarly to Michael Duff, and now the way Lewis paints like this as well, it's quite heavy metal in its feeling. That there are techniques there that are about economy and precision that take some serious discipline to be able to do as well, that are like professional painters, really.
It's about this time, Simon, we need you to insert exhibit photos.
Well, we'll do that. We'll do that after the event, isn't it? I mean, people can go back and see. I mean, on my YouTube channel, if you just just go back to this time last year, and you'll see our run through of last year's event, where we put up all the photos and we talk through them. So, we can keep people waiting for this year's photos.
But there will be a feast for the eyes at London Legends, no question.
Yes,
a feast for, to be honest, every sense, including taste for Domino's pizza, smell, because nothing has smelled so good as Darksphere, obviously. And so, it's great. So it's like a sensation.
Also, a plug for our London Legends GT Instagram. They've got all the photos on there as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. We'll stick a link.
Absolutely.
For that as well.
But the thing is, punks, I guess, if you're listening, is sort of, I don't know, whoever is listening, this kind of people who I would call punks. If you want to come and as you just sort of hang out with a historically minded Warhammer themed crowd, okay, look, it is for people who are the 8th Ed sympathizers are kind of enforced. Obviously, it's an 8th Ed event, but it's very much the broad family of Warhammer fantasy in historical kind of continuum. We're not just here at the, the front of a kind of a curve of being cool. This is the historian's version of Warhammer. So if you want to talk about the longue durée, the bigger picture, an 8th ed event is a good place to do it because it's not just necessarily the past in its own preservation. It's not just the kind of the future at the cutting edge. It's kind of some space in between.
That's right. Yeah.
Discussion happens.
And come for a beer on the Saturday night, come turn up Saturday afternoon and then stay
in the Bull. Exactly. Where astonishing things happen in and of themselves. This is the pub we go to on Saturday night. Gastro pub where you can consume one dinner or indeed multiple dinners as members of our esteemed party did previously.
I cannot believe how much he ate.
Some people enjoyed the food in the Bull so much they had to have it twice. Multiple times. Exactly.
I did look in envy at the fact that he'd ordered more than one dinner. And then
there were
several. It wasn't just him. It was two people.
There were several people who will remain nameless for this video who ordered several meals from the Bull. But Warhammer, playing Warhammer days, for some people is very hungry work. For me, it's been very weird. As I say, I don't feel like eating at all when I'm playing Warhammer. A drink afterwards, yes. Mm-hmm. But some people get very hungry when they are playing it. And as I say, each to his own.
Snacks keep me going.
I mean, you see, the kind of snack I want is sort of chocolate and sugar and that kind of thing, rather than like devouring, I don't know, chicken and chips or something like that. That has never sat so well with me. It depends what kind of army you're playing. If you're playing like a dwarf gunline, then maybe you could sort of sit down. Okay. But if you're playing sort of MSU, you have to kind of get up and, your stuff has to run away. You don't want to overeat that much, right? You have to be like your army. You can't just...
Yeah.
Armies to play on a full stomach. I think Wall of Nurgle with Epidemus. That would be a quite good full stomach kind of army. I think you don't really need to care that much just about your
push position. Your models forward. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mark, you on the red wine as well, are you?
No, I'm probably doing what
he's on the port.
Yeah. It's podcast and port time again.
For the sophisticated palate.
Yes.
Just me on the beers then.
Yes. Alas, there is not a bar at a Dark Sphere, but you can get a drink in the Bull later. Again, alcohol and Warhammer. That's another discussion in and of itself. Again, I wouldn't drink when I was playing, but that's because I want to play well. Afterwards is fine, but not during.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between you who would be vying for the top tables and me who would be trying to keep off the bottom half of the table.
I think beer on the bottom table in round 5 would be a pretty cool place. I used to do competitive debating, and in the last, there were often 5 rounds in debating, just like 5 rounds in Warhammer Fantasy. And when you were in a room of teams where there was no chance of progressing anywhere, it was called a bin room. And in the bin room, when everyone kind of knew it was bin, people would run stupid arguments because they knew it wasn't competitive. So they had a lot of fun though. So maybe it's a bit like bottom table brawling with beer. That's my analogy.
So do we want to talk about changes to com?
So this year, we're going for a sort of like a back to basics approach, right? Where we're saying no Monstrous Arcanum, no Storm of Magic, just the army books, right?
Yeah.
Special characters still allowed, but it's going to be a little bit of a different flavour. Particularly from, I saw in Cardiff they've got Storm of Magic and they've got like Cathay and Kislev as well, right?
They've gone full on the other side there. Yeah, which is 8th ed is already highly modded, of course, because we have a comp pack and we talk about comp as though it's almost just fluidly part of it, which it kind of is now. And has been, since the death of 8th. But yeah, of course, one of the other major events is doing a kind of an anything goes kind of approach, which is also really cool in and of itself. Whereas we've decided this year, not as a philosophical commitment, but as an experiment to try and do this, to actually remove those things and try and go a little bit closer to a sort of an out of the box kind of feel and see what that's like.
Was it? I can't remember. I think it was ETC back in the day for 8th. They put together the Dogs of War for, if I remember correctly. I'm sure I've got the documents for that, which was,
Okay.
obviously much loved army. So we could
Dogs
always
of War had an existence in. I remember their book came out
fifth
in
edition.
year fifth, but there was quite a lot of sick ed rules for them, right? That they had a good series of White Dwarf articles which were designed to really bring them up.
Yeah.
Because they never had them in eighth. That is curious. Given they had everything in eighth. Dogs of War never made it for some reason.
So this year, I mean, we've iterated the pack still very conservatively. There's
Little
a few sort of
tweaks.
small changes to the comp system. So what Tomb Kings have got +3 now, Beastmen are on +2.
We've given Tomb Kings a little boost in points because we weren't quite sure what else to do with them. Beastmen, we've adapted a couple of bits from some of the other packs the other tournaments are running. So Beastmen, you get free, not free, but you can take the Gifts of Chaos on top of your magic items, a bit like the vampires can. We've tried to remove as many of the easy plus points as possible. So if there's like really cheap ones, got rid of those. We've removed duplicate plus points or plus points for duplicate units. So there's no, I'm going to take one unit of Dark Riders, get +1, get another. I can't remember if Dark Riders were one which got it. No, probably not. They're
Thank
too
goodness.
good. But
no
okay.
one was so deluded
Swarms,
to give
then,
Dark Riders a plus point. Even those who wrote the original Triple Crown comp, who you sense kind of were Dark Elf players. They never gave Dark Riders a plus. But yes,
No.
Yes.
But swarms, they're now just +1 for the first unit rather than +1 per swarm unit. Things like that. So
so you can't get multiple pluses for the same unit.
Yeah, there's not a kind of I say in certain versions of the Cardiff event, I believe they were giving +2 per like tyrannic chariot or per sky cutcheon. So there was a little squadron of +8 that was just there on the side to make room for all of the filth.
You guys had to rein me in a little bit because I could have gone crazy with some of the changes. But we've reduced a couple of the special characters so you can fit them in now.
Yeah.
You can have Leon Kerr and you can have
Mazdamundi. I think there's one others. We've given some extra wounds to a couple of special characters because they're pointed the same
we played
as
around with
Lords.
special characters a bit, didn't we?
One wonders though at what point, genuinely, someone like Lord Leon Kerr, the King of Bretonia, 728 points, rules as written. Absolutely terrible. How cheap you would need to make him for the market to actually suddenly say yes. So we've knocked him down to 550 points, I think. In my opinion, he's still not takeable for that. No. I wonder how cheap he would need to be to get. I think about 400 is probably right. Enough so that you could maybe just about have a wizard as well. That would, I think, be the sweet spot for Leon Kerr.
Yeah,
if there is one.
And I suppose the other one we've done is we've made it so special characters who are both a BSB and general, if they flee, they don't automatically get removed. Yeah. So I was going to say that will make things like Grom viable, but is Grom actually ever viable? But you know,
that's really weird actually, because Grom has his little bro Niblet, who's the BSB. So Niblet kind of auto dying means the whole of the chariot dies.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a rule I never. I never really quite liked that rule in 8th edition. It seemed a little bit,
right. But it does make perhaps. It's not Grimgore. Who's the mounted orc? The greatest
Gorbad.
So he was also the BSB. So he no longer removes if he flees. So that might be a more viable option.
True. Yeah, he's quite killy, isn't he? We've also got our usual house rules that we had last year as well. So max 5 dice per spell, max 12 dice per magic phase, and also magic res, but not ward save, so just magic res versus Purple Sun.
Yeah, so you can get a +4 save against Purple Sun, effectively.
Yeah,
maximum.
So those changes, I think, especially the 5 dice one, I think this was generally positively received at the last London Legends. I think the spell that impacts the most, as I said at the time, is Cacophonic Choir, because there's a big version. You see, with Purple Sun, people don't cast the big version unless they're being really kind of Looney Tunes, because there's a good chance you won't get it. Whereas the basic version of Purple Sun is only at 15. I think the big version is 25. Whereas Cacophonic Choir, there is a genuine state change with taking the 24 plus version as opposed to the 12. And it's quite hard to get 24 plus on 5 dice. Look, no one should perhaps cry too much about that, but I think that's probably the spell that's mostly impacted by that. There might be one other that I've just forgotten about temporarily. Dreaded 13th. That's another one that would be hurt by that.
So I'm going to go on a slight digression here about Purple Sun. So, I'm, as you know, I'm a semi-competitive player. I don't do tournaments because of life and family and stuff. And I've always thought Purple Sun was horrendous because I've had some really bad experiences playing against it. Going to a GT, speaking to all the guys who do loads of GTs and stuff, hardly anyone uses it. Everyone just uses Doom and Darkness to reduce your leadership and screw you sideways with it. I'm far more frightened of that than I ever am now of Purple Sun. That's not to say Purple Sun isn't effective, but with the comp on the maximum dice you can get, there's less incentive to potentially use it unless you're
the notoriety. I mean, this spell, for those of you who have existed this long and don't know what Purple Sun is, which I'm sure you probably do, it's a vortex spell that moves, 3 times the artillery dice forwards, eliminates everything removed from play on a failed initiative test. Also, the way the rules are written for vortex in 8, you can materialize the vortex in front, you can send it in any direction, you can do it in combat. It's very flexible. But the thing is, the notoriety of this particular spell perhaps belies, as you were saying, Mark, how often it is actually cast. Also, because it's so notorious, players stop it. It's what eats the Dispel Scroll. It what takes all of the dice pool. And the Death Wizard ends up getting Doom and Darkness through instead, or Spirit Leech through instead. And they're the spells that end up doing the damage. If Death had shit spells and Purple Sun was the only good spell, it wouldn't be a good lore. But the thing is, it's also got very other good spells that you have to eat if you want to stop the sun.
And of course, the lore familiar, the lore attribute is obscene as well.
Yeah,
it is. Although we've taken the pressure off that. I think Spirit Leech is the nastiest one, because you're in this position when you're facing death. He knocks out a 2 dice Spirit Leech, and you know what you have to. Spirit Leech is roll a dice, add your leadership, and if the other guy rolls more, you lose that number of wounds. No armor save. And you feel as though you have to let that go if you want to stop the Purple Sun. And sometimes if he just goes and follows it up and rolls a 5 or a 6, you might just lose your general. And because it's so dangerous, that particular spell in and of itself, that's where I think a lot of the stuff.
Although you can magic res defense against that one anyway.
You can. And in a meta where people use a lot of death, it's that, because then you can choose to let the Spirit Leech go. Well, with much more with more confidence, but sometimes you just lose it. And as I say, it's sniped, gone, turn 1. Such a dangerous. It's the number of options that there are in depth. This is the thing about the 8th Ed magic system. Sometimes it's not about people obsess over one big spell, but it's often about the number of other little spells, the context that you can use them in. Now, Death has lots of that because as Spirit Leech, it has Doom and Darkness, it has Soul Blight, as well as Purple Sun. Another lore, which is less powerful, Heavens, doesn't have the big spell, but a lot of the spells are very useful. Harmonic Convergence, Ice Shard, Blizzard, Curse of the Midnight Wind, all of these are good, and you might get one, and perhaps you don't care which one you get, because it's still helping you a bit. And you can create a lot of different contexts with those spells and throw a small number of dice at each spell. So a Heavens Wizard shouldn't miscast that often, because you're not relying on throwing the kitchen sink at it.
But I mean, just for anyone who doesn't know 8th and is just watching this because they're old world fans and are curious, you have got random winds of magic, so you could just end up with 2 dice in order to cast all your spells, or you could have 12.
Absolutely.
So it's pot luck on whether you've even got enough dice to get them off.
There are so many little permutations. So, for example, if you're afraid of one spell, and your opponent gets a double 6 with the magic phase, should be the worst roll for you, right? He has 12 dispel dice. Sorry, it's power dice. You only have 6 dispel dice, assuming no channeling. The thing is, though, is that even if he throws 6 dice at his big spell, you've still got essentially an even chance, or a little better than even chance, of stopping it with your pool. But if he rolls a double 3, then he's got 6 dice and you've got 3.
Yeah,
So
double.
then you are not stopping the big spell.
Okay.
So that's why even there are huge variations even on the actual number of dice each person gets in terms of what the magic phase is like. Some contexts, many little spells are good. Other contexts, you can stop the big spell. And another context, you simply can't because he's got 6 dice and you've got 3. All of this is part of the nuance and dynamics of the 8th ed magic system, which is why people like us wax lyrical about it compared to this 2d6 thing.
And scream blind murder about it as well when it doesn't go your way.
It's the most frustrating, especially when you begin your magic phase, with the 2 dice, whatever it is, and then you roll a double 1 or something, and then the whole magic phase is just gone. And you think, oh my God, that's the worst thing. Or when you try and do the coup de grace, you have your 1 dice back, you've got all your lancers in, you break your power stone, you do big harmonic convergence, and then it comes 1 dice, one short, and you just
think that double 1. I do wonder. I'm sorry, I'm going on another digression here because I like to. That double 1 roll, if you're a vampire player, for instance, that is so bad for you because you are so heavily reliant on magic to grow your units, whatever it is. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons why they moved a lot of the undead stuff to the command phase in Old World.
Exactly. So that's one of the biggest distinctions of undead in Old World is the resurrection, which is so important to undead. Not a spell in Old World, it's a command mechanic. So you are not dependent upon the winds of magic. You can do it each time. Whereas with undead, you really are, in trouble if you get the wrong winds of magic, which is probably one of the reasons why undead are so good in Old World, because they're not dependent.
Yeah. Maybe we should do some sort of spot prizes at London Legends as well. So like first wizard down the hole on Saturday.
I honestly, that is just the best thing, isn't it? The down the hole. Everybody loves it when their wizard miscasts and just goes straight down the hole.
It depends because there is the critical role of A, magic is important in 8th edition, and B, you can die if it goes wrong. There are how people kind of take this, right? So some people will just howl, or just a roar, or just anger, especially when it's the first one, because it means your wizard gone down the hole at the beginning of the game, which is not even worse. Oh my God. Well, I went Thundercocks. Yeah. First spell, turn round. 1 down the hole immediately. Yeah. Okay.
I think there were about 3 people who lost their wizards on the first game down the hole. It was magical.
It was good though, the wizard. As I say, I chain lightning and I hit, I think 2 demon princes and something else with it. It was really good. I didn't kill them.
Or even the power drain, right? Because the power drain can just reduce your wizard to like
level 1.
Yeah.
You don't lose the points, but you're not. Your wizard isn't contributing. Yeah, of course. I mean, because it's so some people howl, some people it's like take it off and then you're all right, getting on with this now. Like I'm playing my game without a wizard now. And the amazing thing is, though, is sometimes when that happens on turn 1, how many players sometimes actually still win despite not having a wizard? Because then you will often just go and say, right, look, I'm going to get stuck in now. I'm going to play really aggressively. And sometimes it comes off. Because there's much more to 8th ed than magic. Don't let these naysayers who go and say, hey, they're all about death darts and 6 dice and unit killings, but bollocks. It's not that.
It is funny,
sometimes people lose their wizard on turn 1 and they still win.
It is funny though, isn't it? How like all of the sort of big, or not big, but the sort of common criticisms of 8th ed just don't hold true. Like I mean, maybe they did in the first few years of 8th, but right now, I mean, there's hardly any big horde armies. There's hardly any like big 6 dice spells. It's so varied, yeah.
Well, I think that Mark will remember this. I think when 8th came out.
Oh, I know what Mark's going to say. Yeah, he's going to talk about your big horde army, right?
No, not at all. I didn't take a horde of 60 gore to Thundercocks.
There were some. It was amazing because we played a few. I played a practice game against Mark on the Friday, and we had some, shall we say, competitive commentary who were, shall we say, that they were on Mark's side, shall we say. And there was a moment where the gore were I was kind of pinned with my Bretonians, and someone said to Mark, do your Swift reform and put them into a bus, and then he'll be fucked. And Mark was like, well, would I want? And he did it, and it was true. I kind of was, and there wasn't really much I could do about that because I was hemmed in, and I knew I was never one. One of his units had the Crown of Command. The Gore unit that I could break had how many ranks did it have? 11, 12 or something.
Yeah. It was literally me and about 5 of the most competitive 8th edition players on the scene against Luke.
The truth is, though, Mark may not remember this, though. He played me once with my Bretonnians with not 60, but maybe 40 gore. And I'd just been to an event where I'd smashed a Beastman guy who did not reform his thing into a horde. And you put it into a bus at a moment where I would, and then there wasn't much I could do. Because as I say, I wasn't going to be able to blow it off in one charge because of the fact that it was in a bus.
I'll be honest, the list I took to Thundercocks was almost born from the defeats you've given me with your Bretonnians. It was an evolution of that list, and that's what sort of drove how I built it almost. So it almost was tailored to beat you.
Yeah, exactly.
But
there was one moment, though, even though, as he has said, Mark might not be a tournament veteran exactly, but there was one game in Thundercocks that he did play. It was against a strong player. And, as I say, when he emerged from that, it was with the sweat and the stars in his eyes of a man who had been in a fight. And as I say, Mark managed to win that game. And as I say, that was... As I say, the knives were out there, and no question. That was the real thing.
It was a very close game, and it was, to be fair, he probably should have beaten me, but it was just one small blunder on his behalf, and potluck on mine meant that he just couldn't pull something off, and it all went in my favor.
Well, you got to be in there. That's the thing. You could take resilient infantry blocks that can take a pasting, and they hang around. Your opponent makes a mistake, then he's in trouble. It's not that kind of army is not a shit or bust army. With Bretonnians, it's a shit or bust army. If you get it wrong, you're going to lose.
Down to the fact that he had to, rather than me kind of pivot, he had to close the door to me, and that's what screwed him.
Well, but the individual who did this is a 9th Age player, and 9th Age players sometimes know about that. So they put the little Razgor on the edge of their unit to mean that, if I charge you, your redirector means I don't turn, you turn, because I've just happened to have a little boar that's sitting there stopping my unit turning. He knows all the tricks from 9th Age. So exactly. So these are vivid kind of memories that have happened recently, guys. This is what you can get.
And I will say, people who've not attended tournaments, I'm going to call myself a novice tournament player. So I went along as, something out, I didn't know what to expect. And it was just such a family-friendly kind of atmosphere. Everyone was just so welcoming. London Legends is like that. I had a couple of games versus some really competitive people. I had some games where I was down the other end of the tables. I had one of the best games ever against Ian, actually, who was this time playing vampires, not Skaven. And it just looked like a picture-perfect setup of what a GW photo shoot of a battle report should be. And that was just one of the nicest games ever. Didn't take anything seriously. It was just solid fun.
It's worth saying as well, I mean, we say this every year, but, if you're someone who hasn't played in a while, you're a bit rusty, you come along to London Legends, you will get some good games, right? It's not, even if you're unlucky in your first round matchup and you get smashed by a sort of pro player, it'll even out and you'll end up getting some good games against other players that are just there to have fun and, aren't more casual.
I imagine it's the same for any tournament you go to, and that's what makes it quite interesting. And it's got to the stage with London Legends where we've got some of the same people coming back year after year, and it's just so good to see everybody.
Yeah, including really even people like David Jorkey, for example. I mean, he's not playing competitively, but he's been there each year, and so absolutely, you will get. Although I don't think it's uniquely an 8th Ed thing. I think this is probably true in any edition of Warhammer Fantasy. On the lower tables, you will, because Swiss pairing creates that context where the competitive players, sure, they'll rise up, they can play each other. The people who are in the middle will often be in the middle. And then beer and pretzels will often play beer and pretzels. And that's not meant to be in a sense of kind of a derogatory way. They're all part of the same, they all play their own role, of course.
And they can be competitive games at the bottom. They just may have less optimized lists.
Absolutely. Or indeed, you can be competitive without even necessarily, being great at the game. I mean, the desire to, I was less good at Warhammer Fantasy when I started, but I was still quite competitive. That doesn't necessarily change. You can still have all that. And I say that, and that's all there. And it's it's just a lovely kind of community that's kind of become, in a sense, I say we've seen it now. This will be its fourth iteration, and we've seen it kind of, in some ways, repeat and become its own something. And but the thing is to say it's relevant to the conversation that's being had now, amongst the kind of the cool kids who are playing old worlds. It's more relevant than they think because of the shadow behind the door. And to say when the door opens, the shadow will suddenly become manifest. And I don't mean that in a doomy kind of way. I just mean that the twilight of the idols matter, and that's why 8th edition still matters in its own way, because it will enter the conversation soon, even though as though the door was shut on it. But as I say, some things are too mesmerizing to go away completely.
And I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on somebody who's a returning player. Adam, our current reigning champion, is coming back this year, but he's the only one of the previous champions who will be there this year at the moment, because I don't think Mike's coming.
We've had Mike, we've had Warren, and we've had obviously Adam.
So Adam is the only person who can potentially get the extra hand weapon this year at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, although I think the jabronis, as they call themselves, whom are this little team of competitive players, I think they'd quite like to have one axe each. So really, it should be Alex this year, or Harry as well. Who could. That would be the thing. And then they literally a bunch of blokes with like real actual axes. They could be like, I don't know. When they get to a minimum unit size 5 guys, okay? So you can have that. The jabronis. Or the jabroni generals.
Although I imagine Nav, if Nav's coming, I imagine he will have something to say about.
Well, exactly. Yes. Well, Nav,
because he was our runner-up.
Indeed. Yeah. Nav is my regular player, and indeed, yes, that he can never be. He can never be counted up. A player with the highest appetite for risk that I've ever seen in a Warhammer player. I mean, he will go for double 6 charges all the time. And this, of course, means that, as I say, he often sometimes will, when it doesn't go off, it doesn't go off. But at the same time, it does mean he will often sometimes win from outrageous situations because of the amount of chutzpah that is required to play in that way.
All right, guys. So anything else you want to add about the event? We've got open lists this year. So we're going to be publishing those, a week before the event.
Yes, I mean, we will once again be playing in the event, which is not something we did in the first couple, but we were able to do so, not all of us, all the games, but without... Well, we feared initially that we thought, we might slow down the event or somehow make it worse by contributing ourselves. But we simply found that not to be the case because the number of rules queries that were required were relatively minimal. Because, well, for a lot of reasons, which is wonderful for us because being able to play does make the event also. I mean, we would enjoy it even if we weren't playing. Don't get us wrong, but at the same time, it's still more fun.
I think we're just getting better at it, because just managing, the spreadsheets and the scorings and the queries and everything. Yeah.
I assume we'll probably use a spreadsheet again, but there's an option that we might use best coast pairings and try and throw.
Yes, there is a possibility of that. Yes, and Owen, in relation to one technological innovation, do check out our website, London Legends.
I was going to say, are we going to link everything?
Which is being provided, which is being created for us by our ever generous patron, Damon Burgess, who is our friend stateside, who has helped us innovate. And this website is truly a thing of beauty. And we should perhaps put a link to that maybe in the beginning, so people can kind of check that out. And I'd say this is it's a serious outfit now, London Legends guys. This is not just some hobby hero. As I say, Steam Preservation Railway is the real thing. Exactly.
The real thing.
This is what real Warhammer is. Never mind this old rubbish. This is what we're
I'm going to throw down a challenge for somebody as well. I am currently the #1 ranked Beastman player at 8th edition in the UK. By virtue of being the only person who's played Beastman in the last 2 years in a GT. So if anybody wants to try and get that crown, it's wide open for the taking.
Are you listening, Jack Cropper? Have you disappeared over to Old World? Can you? Yeah. Exactly.
Brian, I believe, might be bringing his Beastman though, so I suspect he'll knock me off that spot.
I love it when there's competition, when there's like 1 or 2 guys. That's the ultimate thing. Is you're on for something good when like best Chaos Dwarf in race becomes keenly contested. Yeah. These accolades still matter, punks. Yeah. They still have meaning. Get the bragging rights, walking down the streets of West London and say, hey, I'm the #1 ranked Beastman player. Don't you know? Bucket of chicken McTasties, please. Yeah.
All right, guys. So thanks for listening. Come join us in June for some real Warhammer fantasy battles in London. And we'll see you there.